We have Sam Kusek, who is the comics lead over at Kickstarter here. I really wanted to spend the bulk of this conversation just having a real good in-depth conversation about the state of comics and crowdfunding and what's working, what maybe not, changes coming to Kickstarter, the whole nine there. So welcome everyone. Sam, would love to just start with you and give you an open floor if you wanted to share any initiatives. What's one thing you want comic book creators to know about that you're working on Kickstarter right now?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tyler. It's always fun to be a part of these conversations. I mean, the biggest thing for us is, as you all have probably seen in the past couple of weeks, is that we've rolled out our pledge manager. Very excited, having a lot of conversations with folks about adopting that, trying that out, and getting feedback. In the initial release rate, we framed it as an open beta, so there's still things we're working on, still things that we're making changes to and feature enhancements that we're going to roll out. But as you can imagine, this is a really big feature release for us. It's something that people have been asking about for a while. We want to make sure that the entire crowdfunding process is all under one umbrella. Reaching out to your audience, encouraging the people who are on this call, I'd love for you all to try it where appropriate, right? You can activate it while the campaign is live. You can start building out your shipping costs, different surveys for different reward offerings, capturing taxes, customs, all kinds of things like that. That's been really my focus for the past month or so, is just that pledge manager. Anyone who's interested in learning more, happy to connect you directly either with myself or with people at Kickstarter so we can talk about some of the more nuanced aspects of your campaign.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great place to start, Sam. I'm actually going to be testing it out and giving my first spin on the Pledge Manager with this ComixLaunch Planner project that I'm doing. I'm going to jump to our panel here to get some feedback or just to have a discussion a little bit about the decision to use that Pledge Manager or not. I do have a number of topics I want to get to, but I'm going to try my best to make this interactive and make this fun for everyone tuning in. So shout out to everybody that's here already, and we'll try to make this valuable for you. But I guess I'll start with Rob Multari, because Rob, I know you are a veteran Kickstarter project. You've got Snowpaw coming up, and you also have experience working with a number of different pledge managers as well as the standard Kickstarter survey. What are your current thoughts on the pledge manager, and what do you maybe need to see to make the decision to use that product?
Yeah, I mean, right now I've been using a backer kit for the pledge manager. I like the back end as far as doing the add-ons. I feel like the process of putting them together and working with them there, it has been a little bit easier than Kickstarter's at this moment. I'm hoping that that would change soon or in the near future. And also from what I've kind of read and saw and talked about it with other creators, as far as with Kickstarter's pledge manager, right now, it's my understanding that you're not able to batch multiple backers into an export to be able to ship them, an export to be able to print multiple shipping labels at once. Right now you kind of have to do that individually per backer. That's a big thing for me, because streamlining the process. It's already, when I have 400 to 600 or more backers, that's a lot of backers to do individually, especially when I have 200 doing my base physical tier for my standard edition. Being able to export those who don't have add-ons or just basically there for that single issue. It's easy to export all of them all at once and then print all 200 labels, because it's the same weight, same shipping, same everything, rather than to just kind of do that individually. It saves some of the larger crowdfunders some time. Believe me, I would love to have everything all in-house, everything through Kickstarter if I could. Again, a lot of it's, for me, it's streamlining to make the process easier. If I were able to merge the two into one giant crowdfunding platform, definitely love to do that.
Christian, are you planning on using the pledge manager with the next launch?
I'm still like a little bit on the fence because I want to see all the details, because I kind of like Rob, I also use Baker Kit. And sometimes I just don't even use like a let run, because normally what I do is I have them on my email list already. So if they want like add-ons, because as we have the late pledge feature, which is fantastic, because that again, hey, in case you want something else before we close, because normally what we do is like after the campaign, we have like a month of like pre-sales. So anybody who really didn't went to, because it happened, oh, I forgot, oh, I was on holidays, oh, blah, 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 something happened. And or I want that t-shirt, or I want the stickers, or I want whatever. So I normally we give them like a month afterwards with our email, directly with our email list, or even we even do like updates directly to the campaign. But I will definitely give it a try
Yeah.
to see how it goes. And there's something now I have Sam here. There's something I already talked to Tyler back in the day when we have the last time we spoke. And this is something that, and I really hope that Kickstarter will like put it something like Rob was saying, like to put integrated also inside. It's a whole community thing, especially for like reaching backers or reaching people within the platform, because I don't really like social media that much, especially the people who run it. So I would prefer to give my advertising or marketing money directly to Kickstarter than give it to, Zuckerberg or whoever. So again, that's an idea out there. And I would, because I think a lot of people are doing it. I saw, like, for example, the heavy metal campaign, they're doing like a special community platform they're using called Circle. Never heard of it. I just like find out a couple of days ago. So I think that's like the way going forward, like to have your own communities of like-minded, and especially based on your niche or based on the people who have bought from you before or related to that. So more than the mainstream, let's call it the mainstream social media, the big guys, the big four, big five, depending
Yeah.
on what you use,
Yeah, Christian, I mean, that, talking about ways for Kickstarter to help creators connect with their fans. I mean, that's kind of the core of their mission. And so I do want to get Sam's take on some of that and some ideas there. I did want to give Alan a chance to share his thoughts on the Pledge Manager so far, and then we'll have Sam just share some of his feedback on what you all have said about that new initiative.
Yeah, so we're taking advantage of it for this one. We've never used BackerKit before. We've always gone directly through Kickstarter for everything, but figure we'll give it a try. Plus, I'm hoping the more that I buy into the Kickstarter ecosystem, the more likely I am to get a project I love tag. So, I'm willing to suck up to whoever I need to in order to get that added to my project.
Yeah, that's definitely something. And, I'm curious your reaction to some of these things. I'm sure some of this is stuff that you've heard before, Sam. What's your
Yeah.
reaction?
No, I mean, my reaction is generally positive. This is the open conversation that we want to have with our creators, right? We want you to be either using the platform, in Alan's case, giving us feedback about your experience, or with regards to Christian or Rob, letting us know about what features are important to you. Like I said at the beginning, we're very much still in that period of development and rolling new things out. So getting that feedback is helpful for us. The community thing is related to the Pledge Manager. It is a little bit of a different beast in terms of how we integrate that into the site. But I know that's something that people have been interested in for a while as well. This is all good. And luckily, it's no major surprises, right? I think it's something that we're aware of and that we're actively working on as well. But we're just over that initial hump right now. So I would say stay tuned and keep your eyes peeled to the Kickstarter channels for more info.
Yeah, cool. And this one came through from the folks at Afterlight Comics. They said, looking forward to trying out the Pledge Manager. Are add-ons available in the Pledge Manager?
Yes, add-ons should be available. We do have Help Center articles about how people can use the Pledge Manager. So I'd say check those out. And then, as Christian asked, I provided my email in the private chat as well. Feel free to hit me up with any questions. I can put you in touch either with Answer Things myself, or I can put you in touch with some of the product folks at our Pledge Manager team.
Yeah, sounds good. I told the people that are backing my current Kickstarter that because I'm using the Pledge Manager for that for the first time, you can definitely expect a walkthrough and my experience with it in a podcast episode in the near future. So I'm looking forward to diving in as a new product competing with the expectations a lot of people have with BackerKit is probably going to be the toughest thing. That BackerKit's product is, has 10 years of equity built into it. They've heard every question. They've had to respond to every potential use case. And that there's creators like Rob or myself that have all of this time spent building out add-ons and things in there and shipping tables and everything, where copying it over and redoing that work from start, it's a smaller climb. But for the creators that was like, oh, I want those features, but I don't know that it's going to be worth it to spend 2% of my campaign raise to test out a platform that also is a little bit scary. I think, a lot of pulling those creators in is going to be where this is going to shine right away. And then, as it matures, you'll have the opportunity to win over folks like Christian and Rob and myself. So there's a lot of ways we can go with this conversations, and I'm sure you guys have questions for Sam, and I'm going to try to open it up. But I thought, because I saw this thing sort of taking on a little bit of fire over the past couple of days and people sharing it on Facebook, there was a post that Jimmy Palmiotti posted over on LinkedIn that I want to just bring up and then have a discussion about. This is Jimmy Palmiotti. He's, longtime industry vet, well respected in both the direct market, major publishing world, big two publishing world, but also has had a lot of success with paper films, his Kickstarter publishing ventures, etc. But he posted this a couple days ago. He said, my opinion on crowdfunding and why it's taking a hit right now. The decline in Kickstarter's effectiveness for small creators is sadly rooted in several interconnected factors. Whenever I hear somebody make an argument, looking at the premise is always where I tend to want to start first and foremost. But let's just look at the major things that Jimmy's calling out here. He says, first and foremost is the erosion of trust. When creators fail to fulfill their promises, delivering late products, mishandling communication, or neglecting backers, it damages the credibility of crowdfunding as a whole. Even creators with impeccable track records like myself suffer the fallout as skepticism grows among potential supporters. I cannot say this enough. Customer interaction and on-time delivery is a must. I hate that I have to go on social media each time explaining that I've done 25 campaigns and never deliver a book's late. They don't care. Once burned, they do not come back. The influx of major corporations into Kickstarter has further complicated the landscape. Originally a platform designed to empower independent creators, it's increasingly become another commercial venture to saturate for companies with substantial financial resources. Their frequent campaigns flood the marketplace, diminishing visibility for smaller projects. And worse, when these corporations fail to meet expectations, delivering late or offering poor engagement, the negative perception of crowdfunding deepens. I see this happening all the time. They get the money and sit back and start another campaign the next week. Economic pressures compounding the issue, rising across every aspect of production, printing, shipping, and even essential things like comic bags and boards strain both creators and backers. Disposable income shrinking, harder for fans to support projects at the level they once did. And dominant publishers continue to saturate the industry with excessive variant covers, aggressive expansion, mass-produced content. And then the last thing he said, he also made a point that within major companies, those creators are also seeing decreasing wages or wage stagnation. And finally, this convergence of factors presents significant challenges. And I think we are seeing this happen in the last few months big time. But I would love to hear what you guys think above and beyond what you've observed that may add to this list. So that was Jimmy. And so for the sake of this conversation, I want to start with Sam, and then we'll also get the perspectives of the other creators here. Does the data suggest that Kickstarter's effectiveness for small comic creators has actually declined, or is this a fear and a feeling that perhaps isn't borne by the data? Sam, I know I threw this at you, so I don't necessarily expect you to come in here with all of the stats to prove or disprove this assertion. What's your thoughts and your take on Jimmy's premise first? And then I want to dive into some of the individual issues that he raised.
Yeah, so generally, I think outside of data, because I haven't had time to pull the numbers and look at this, I have been hearing from folks that people are struggling to get some newer backers coming in, which I think is, as Jimmy indicated, kind of a mix of a lot of different things. I always point to economic pressures and really uncertainty being a big part of it. I think people, I know personally, I'm being more conservative with my money and making just more, I think, strategic purchases over time, which is unfortunate, right? It's unfortunate for those smaller creators, but I do think that's a contributing factor. I will say, last year, Tyler, I think we talked about this in the interview that we did. We did see an increase in launches and successes, 5.25 increase both in launches and successes throughout the year. So there is still growth happening throughout the platform. And I think more people, to Jimmy's point about the major companies, it is a double-edged sword, right? It does take away from smaller creators. I will say it also brings a lot of first-time backers to the platform who we are working on efforts to make sure that they stick around and find their next favorite comic through the platform. So it's an influx of both people are coming maybe for Transformers or G.I. Joe, and a lot of them are still sticking around to find new campaigns. It's complicated right now, you know. I think it's a really complicated time, but I would say things are still stable. I don't think there's as rapid a decline as Jimmy is indicating, but it's definitely there's a lot of challenges at the moment.
Rob, thoughts? Is this feelings, or do you think there's some there?
I think it's a combination of both. I think a lot of us have personal feelings in this and see how our campaigns have kind of gone over time. I think there is something to the economics to it, where, as Sam also said, people are being more conscious about what they're spending their money on. Comic books are a frivolity, whereas food is a necessity, gas is a necessity. And I've seen this over time too. Within the last couple of years, I've seen more and more backers who regularly would go for the higher end variants, go down to a regular standard edition cover, or even to the digital. Like my digital has grown as high as like my standard cover, you know. So people want to read. My current backers, who are my wolf pack as I refer to them, you know, they come strong every time. You know, they keep me going. But also, like I said, I've noticed that a lot of them have shifted in what they've been, you know, I know what they were getting, and I can see where they're going now. So I have seen that. And then I kind of agree with the whole, it's harder to bring in newer backers, you know, not me, you know, even for like a established, like I have 2 serialized comic book series that I put on here. And with Kickstarter, like I said, you can see the numbers of new backers dropping each campaign. And it's not necessarily because the story is bad, because people who are backing before are coming back. I think it's economy. I think it's different factors. I agree to some extent that maybe other campaigns that have burned people might keep those people away. But like I said, my backers who regularly come back trust me, they know me. I do updates all the time. So I think if you have an audience who trusts you, you'll be fine.
So, you know, I'm seeing this in the chat. Amanda Rachel said Kickstarter isn't shoppable for the casual backer anymore. And I'm curious, like Christian, maybe like, where do you stand on that? Do you feel like it's harder now to get backers, or that the effectiveness has declined? And at the same time, there's also for me, I'm wondering, like, what are we talking about between, like, what times are we talking about when we say it's harder? Then I want to know when the golden age of small creators crushing it on Kickstarter was, such that we are no longer in it. Because I can also make an argument that over the past 3 to 5 years, the Kickstarter's rolled out so many different tools and ways that get us potentially more eyeballs, and the platform itself is bigger, that it's a pie, like the pie has grown. But yeah, I'm curious where you stand on that.
I'm kind of like, I go with Rob also, like we said. I think it's a mixed bag of things. First, things I've seen from my own campaigns, and things I've seen from a lot of colleagues, a lot of friends of mine who have run campaigns, or even people have hired me for consulting, stuff like that. There's things like, I'm going to get a little bit technical here, like the CPC or the CPRs, or like actual cost of client acquisition has grown across the board, not only about comics on Kickstarter, but about anything. We have a couple of friends who help us with marketing from time to time, especially when we have new campaigns, and they tell us that, hey, it's getting more and more complicated to get eyeballs and to get people to join in and to buy whatever. And I don't think it's so much it's an issue with Kickstarter or who is on Kickstarter or all the crowdfunding platform. It's more like a whole political, social, economical situation out there. So this, as Rob was saying, we don't sell food, so we don't sell something that is completely essential to live. So, but it's true that there is something, for example, that you were saying before, when was the golden era of Kickstarter? For me, before the pandemic, we used to sell a lot more. It was easier, let's call it quote unquote easier. We could hit 10, 15K a lot easier than now, with less resources, with less marketing, with less. And now to get more or less the same result, the input is a lot bigger. And talking about directly here like a business. So in order to get the same output, the input needs to be a lot bigger, and we need to be more professional. That's a combination of several things. It's not only the big guys coming in, that can be one. It's not only the economical situation. That for me is the big one, more than the who is in the platform. And also another thing we haven't taken into account, we have gotten better with years. So if you see my first campaign 12 years ago, has nothing to do with what we do now, like zero. So of course, the competition, even within independent comic, has grown exponentially, incredibly high with the times, and that's normal. That's progression, As
Yeah.
better, as more than the more resources you have, the bigger team you have, the more things you can put in, like in the video or in the pledges and all that. So I think it's a whole combination of things. But it's true that, as I mentioned before, the acquisition cost is becoming higher, sadly. Well, so, yeah, because that's the situation, It's not what I would like to be. So
Yeah,
yeah, definitely something.
I think that's a good comment, just to be aware that lots of platforms are seeing changing behaviors. I think the pandemic was one of those things where there was a lot of fear in there, but everyone with online businesses saw those online businesses get surges of traffic, especially when most other options for in-person sales and things like that went away or were significantly paused for a significant amount of time. So it was a bit of a boom time for a lot of places. I can buy the notion that for projects that were really crushing it, they may have been turbocharged a little bit during the pandemic or in the fallout of the pandemic, and now we're back towards more reality potentially. I'd be curious, as a project for the data folks over at Kickstarter, Sam, just again to challenge that premise and to see like what's the success rate for first time Kickstarter creators, and has that significantly changed, positive, negative, or not at all, over the past several years? Comics is kind of a little bit unique on the Kickstarter platform in that we have the most returning creators, and there's also strong linkage that the best predictor of future success on Kickstarter is past success on Kickstarter. So when you have a lot of veterans and a track record, the expectations meet, but does that mean that it's more of a struggle for new first time creators or less established creators, or is it a better platform overall? So again, I'd love to have some numbers to match the feelings there. But regardless of that, I'd be curious, and maybe we'll start with Alan and then go back to Sam. Like, of those factors that Jimmy raised, which of these factors do you sort of see as the biggest risk to comic creator crowdfunders? And is there anything that Kickstarter can or is doing to mitigate it? And so Jimmy mentioned erosion of trust from failed delivery, influx of major corporations and publishers, economic pressures and rising costs, or just overall Kickstarter market saturation, and maybe specifically comic book market saturation. But Alan, which of those keeps you up at night?
So actually, we bought a lot of our first time backers with us when we launched our first campaign in 2023. So we haven't had that problem of other creators not delivering affecting us. At least I don't think so. And then as far as influx of major corporations and publishers, I get that it does draw attention away, but if it brings more people to the platform and Kickstarter can figure out how to monetize it, I don't have a problem with that. I think the two things that I'm more worried about are economic pressures and rising costs. I mean, I know, especially with the way shipping is overseas, we've lost a few of our overseas backers, or they've switched over to digital because it's just prohibitively expensive to try and ship anything to them now. And then there's uncertainty around tariffs. And I know comic books technically aren't part of the tariff situation, but I think there is a lot of concern about that. I do think that market saturation's a concern, and I'll add one more to that, that there's a lot of NSFW slop in the comics category now, and I think that does kind of detract between real projects and not real projects. And not all NSFW comics are, I wouldn't consider them slop. There's some really, really good ones. Like I think Bad Bug does a great job and so on. But there's stuff that's just, effectively, just cover pinups and stuff like that and not real comic books. And I do think that that takes away from people trying to find real projects. So, and this goes back to what Amanda was saying, I think that hurts the discoverability a little bit when you have to go through all of these pinup mills to get to actual comics.
Which of these issues is Kickstarter internally most concerned about or feeling like they can at least address, Sam?
So I'll start with market saturation and getting to Amanda's point about curation. Two things that I have done in the past couple of months that I think are helping with discoverability and really a focus on comic discoverability and talking directly to the audiences, moving away more from pointed social media posts and having a dedicated comics newsletter that goes out to backers of comics projects. So every month on the last Friday of every month, I produce a newsletter that goes out that highlights 6 comics projects that I choose. It has a spotlight from a creator or an industry person who's talking about a campaign that they really like, and then my musings on news and information about where I'll be as I attend a lot of conventions as part of this role. So that's one way that we're trying to break through that market saturation, is having outside of the PWL and new and trending newsletters that go out on a week, having more direct communication that's specifically focused on comics. And I've seen a lot of success on those, frankly, just looking at the numbers. I can, at a campaign level, look at the referral code, and on some placements in there, I'll see 14, 15 backings from a posting on there for a particular project, which, depending on the size of the project, can really move the needle. So that has been really helpful. Alan, to your point about not safe for work newsletters, that's been an interesting challenge since I've come onto the role. We also have now a not safe for work newsletter. So there is a way that that content is highlighted and sent directly to those people. We are definitely focusing on the content that is more narrative driven, more of your traditional comic that has adult content or sexy content in it, as opposed to some of those pinups, because to your point, like, that is ultimately a comic, right? I'm reading, for example, I'm reading Omaha the Cat Dancer right now, which is effectively this like big grand soap opera that has sex scenes in it between the characters. And that's the kind of content that I want to be able to focus on and highlight, because I do think there's some really great content out there. So we are trying to give that more of a dedicated space for the people who want to find it and highlight some of those good ones there. So that's some of the effort that we are putting on for market saturation. And I would say that's probably our biggest, that and economic pressures are our biggest concerns at the moment from that list.
Yeah. Yeah. Clay Adams, just speaking to that point, said, you know, a family member who has only backed my campaigns doesn't get my project recommended to her when she logs on to Kickstarter. And as she put it, I only see boobs. So that I think that is especially the concern for creators that don't do that kind of stuff. Just the balance of, you know, not wanting to provide a bad experience for people that they're driving to the platform because of what else is on the shelf, essentially, or their content being too closely associated with other stuff that, you know, is wildly, you know, different. But man, you know, it is a tough challenge because one man's slop is another man's treasure, right? So it's tough for Kickstarter, I'm sure, to decide where to draw lines, or if they're even in the lines drawing business.
So
And Sam, I just want to say real quick, as a backer, personally, I've backed over 500 projects myself. I love your newsletter. I find it really helpful, and I do
hey, thanks
find
so
good
much.
things there. So I do, as a backer, really appreciate you doing that, and I hope it's getting more attention from people.
I just want to say too, Tyler, on the not safe for work recommendations point, I have made a recommendation to do some filtering. I can't say specifically about a timeline of when that would roll out, but I'm hoping in the future that we'll be able to allow people on an account level to filter out not safe for work content if they don't want to see it. That's a recommendation that I've made. I can't make any specific promises, but I have heard that feedback from people, that because you sign up for Kickstarter, it doesn't necessarily mean you want to see that not safe for work content. Everybody has a different set of values. You have to be 13 to sign up for Kickstarter. Some of that stuff is 18 plus. So we definitely don't want to, get stuff in the hands or in the eyeballs of somebody who's not ready or willing for that kind of content. So just want to say, I do hear that, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to make changes at a later date.
And just so that we don't bury the lead here, how does one go to get on that specific comics newsletter that you are putting out, Sam?
I'll send this over to you, Tyler, if you want to share it. We've got a sign up page here. It's -newsletters-comics after Kickstarter.com. Please sign up. As Alan said, I hope it is helpful for people. It gives you some insight and introduces you to some new people in the comics space. There's a lot of great distinctive voices, both from Kickstarter and comics publishing in general side of things. I try and talk about, like, been talking about a lot about the Diamond News, everything that's happening there. Been talking about retailer tiers and better education around that. So there's a lot of conversation happening, and I want to make sure that Kickstarter is a nice cultural point, right? I don't want us to just be this monolith that feels like we're not paying attention to the rest of what's going on.
Yeah. Follow the Kaiser said it would be nice to know that there was a push to get eyes on campaigns that are not funded yet. There are some really great projects out there that are just not getting eyes on the project. Thoughts on that? And then also from Patrick Lugo said, how would one go about getting their project featured on Sam's newsletter?
Hey, Patrick, that is, the process for my selecting projects to get newsletters is really entirely up to me. I'm able to post or select projects, and I would say just give me a heads up about your project. I always tell people I really need to know about projects 4 to 6 weeks in advance of launch so I can have a better understanding about where they're going to be running. And it really just kind of depends on how they run in the timeline of when the newsletter is going out. I try and select things that are going to have at minimum a week runtime out from when the newsletter goes out. I don't want to pick something that's going to end the next day or the next 2 days, because there's a chance that, especially with it going out on Fridays, there's a good chance that we just lose visibility over the weekend and people don't see it till Monday, right? So the more advance notice you can give me, the better opportunity you're going to have to get into a newsletter.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I put out a call to some of the folks that were backing the current project that I'm launching for a comic book crowdfunding planner. And so we got a few that came in for Sam and the group. So there's a question. Austin Light said, is it better to have a large projection goal to hit or set the minimum goal and see how far it goes? I would think if it funds faster, it will accelerate more funding. But if people are moved by their project, they may pledge more to hit the larger goal. I want to start actually with Rob. Rob, you're somebody that has had the gamut of crowdfunding experiences. You've had projects that fund in a very short time, day one funding. You've had projects that your initial project, first ever project, failed to fund, but that you didn't let that stop you. You've also had projects that's like down to the wire and sweat and bullets. What's your approach and thoughts about this, and does it vary from project to project in terms of your projection, your project goal?
Yeah, I think, for starting out, like, I've always been the advocate of set your goal to what you need to produce it, because if you don't fund and for the costs of printing the book, paying the art, basically, if you don't have the money yourself, which, most often I pay for the art, then come in for the printing and, everything else, you know, that's not cheap. So like a bare minimum, $5,000 for a single 24 issue comic is generally what most people need, unless they are the artist and the writer and the letter, basically do everything themselves. But if you're a writer like me who's paying for the art, paying for the printing, paying for basically everything, you have to look at your budget. And for me, it's always been what I want to set. So like my first failed campaign, I was going to kickstart my series by going 3 issues deep, and I went for a $20,000 goal. Obviously, that was very naive of me without having an audience. The next time I came back, I had already self-published issues 1 and 2 on my own with my own money. Finally, I couldn't really do that for issue 3. So I came back just for issue 3, set my funding goal at 5,000 is what I needed, and I overfunded. So, just being able to have that kind of like track record, having an audience to get me there. If I would have done it at like $1,000 as my goal and just ended it there, I would have been pretty screwed because I didn't have the extra money to put that out then. We were talking about different projects. So as it got to be, I was putting my trades out, that minimum cost is $10,000 for me, because a trade, especially when I put out a trade, I usually do something a little more specialty with die cut, and it's a thicker book. And so trying to put out enough units to make it worthwhile, that's not a cheap endeavor. So raising that bar up to that higher amount, that's something there. And then when I'm putting out my plushies, that's a whole nother bag. Like that's $5,000 right there to produce something like this and have enough for reselling later. And again, as we were talking about, comics tend to go easier than like a kid's book, especially if it's a more of an adult theme or, more general audience theme than a kid's book or a plushie or whatever. So you kind of have to gauge that and figure out what's your budget, what is the market value, and what are people going after. So you kind of have to know what you're doing. And for me, I would rather not fund than have to, because I'm already got skin in the game. I'm already putting my own money in it. So if I don't fund, then that means that's less I have to put in later and go further in the hole.
Alan, your thoughts on goal setting?
I'm a coward, so by default, I set the bare minimum funding goal because I don't want to have to sweat up until the last day as to whether or not I'm going to get funding. But same thing. I mean, we've been very fortunate that our first campaign was a huge success, and that allowed us to fund the next set of comics. And so we've been funding ahead of time. Basically, each previous campaign basically funds the next comic that we do, and we're able to fully produce the comic before we jump into Kickstarter. So I set the absolute minimal goal to cover the printing costs because I've already paid for the art and hope that we overperform. In addition, because there is this concern of whether it's real or imagined, as you pointed out, Tyler, about, is it saturated? Is Kickstarter starting to struggle a little bit, which is not something we've experienced, but I know other people have. The goal is $10,000 and you haven't done a Kickstarter before and you can't bring a large following with you to hard to hit that campaign. No matter how good your art is, no matter how talented you are, it is really hard to hit a $10,000 goal for first-time funders. But I see that mistake happen a lot with a lot of first-time creators.
So I want to jump to Sam, and you can comment on the goal decision, but also I want to do it in the context of this question that came through from Paul Eza, super backer, who asked, what factors into the algorithm for Kickstarter to boost their promotion of a project? Is it pre-launch followers, first day backers, neither, something else? Is it percentage funded? Is it total dollar amount? And he says, is it this is a mystery that can help newer creators become more successful. This is a lot of like the Kickstarter algorithm talk, and if there's some way I can game this or a secret to it. But what do you want to share in terms of a mindset and strategies for creators as they're thinking about whether it be goal setting or just anything they're doing? What's the right mindset they should take? Yeah.
So when I think of goal setting, I'm outside of my being a Kickstarter employee and the senior outreach lead for comics. I'm a creator myself. I make tabletop role-playing games. And my mindset, just from that perspective, has always been ask for what I need and give myself a 20% buffer when shit goes bad, because shit always goes bad. Like everybody has had that happen to you in projects, right? So I would say, prepare for something to go wrong. I've said that on this podcast. I say it pretty much on every podcast that I'm on. So whatever your goal is, prepare. In terms of the algorithm, I will say the algorithm, as big and sort of scary and technical of a word as it is, there are aspects of the algorithm that are a mystery to me and are a mystery to some Kickstarter employees and outreach employees as well. So I can't speak specifically to here are all the things that you need to hit to be able to be picked up by that. That being said, what I can tell you is that pre-launch followers are definitely something that we encourage and pay attention to. That helps us from our overall promotion and general promotion. We do promote primarily live campaigns, I will say, but for pre-launch followers, I will definitely say that that is something that is just helpful to continue to grow and focus on, because we see a 30% conversion of pre-launch followers to backers, right? So if you have 100 people, you're going to get 30 people coming in the door in the first couple of days to back, and that can be a really strong indicator of success. The system has things built into it. When something is almost funded, a tag will come up programmatically, and you can see that in the search, right? So we are helping people get over the line there. If something is coming to the end, we have those programmatic checks that'll say, those emails that will go out, those 48-hour emails, those 72-hour emails will go out and remind people. What I look for in terms of the stuff that I personally choose to promote is a solid amount of preview pages. I recommend like 3 to 6 preview pages, so you're giving enough of an appetizer without giving the whole story away. And then a good variety of rewards, a digital option, your base tier, and some higher tier options. I love seeing things like original art if people put that in there, or a way for people to be drawn into the comic. I think that is really fun. Tyler, like you mentioned, one-on-one sessions available if people are interested and willing to do that. I think that kind of community building and, to your point, helping those first-time creators feel more confident and understand from the masters at work, right, how they can do it themselves, because that's what really Kickstarter is all about. We never want to create a gatekeeping community where you guys are the only ones who are having success. We want to welcome new people and we want to help people build new businesses out. So that's a lot of different information for the questions that were asked.
Yeah, absolutely. But good stuff to know. Can you say definitively, because I still do hear people is like, well, if I can just get my project to show 5,000% funded, even though I'm asking for $5 or something like that, then that's going to automatically shoot me to the top of the Kickstarter page. You wouldn't recommend people that need 5,000 but set a $5 goal simply because it's going to game Kickstarter, right?
Yeah, and here's the thing: is that is not necessarily. I do think there's a perception about how the website works with regards to that, right? Like there are different search functionalities. If you go to the comics category, everything that's mixed in is shown is not the highest funded at the top. You can look at that and you can see that, but that's not automatically how things are populated. It's more random. It's a little more esoteric. You can look at newer things. That's generally how I look at stuff, is I'll go through what's launched in the past couple of weeks or past week. I'll also say too, because this has come up, just because you're successful doesn't necessarily mean you're going to automatically be a featured project on the homepage. That's something that we plan out. That's something that's very deliberate to make sure that we have a wide variety of categories that are shown to people. And the carousels that show up are user-based and programmatically set by the algorithm, right? So it's based on your backing history, your behavior, the things that you look at there. Charlie makes a great point. Hi, Charlie, about the backer analytics. I would say, even if you're a first time creator and you have, I would encourage first time creators before they come to Kickstarter, if you have the ability to put something out on, like, I'm just using platforms off the top of my head that I use, but a drive through RPG or an itch.io or even a Squarespace. I use Squarespace for my first crowdfunding campaign, and I was able to pull region data down from that, and that allowed me to set my shipping rates based on where I knew my audience was coming from, so I could speak directly to them and make sure that they felt prepared to make a purchase, right? I would say take time to build up an audience or build up a practice outside of Kickstarter before you come to Kickstarter, because that's going to be a really great way for you to get information. Backer analytics is a great point. It's just a difficult thing to do sometimes, I think, when you're the first time creator at Kickstarter. So anything you can do to have more information about the people who want your content, the better prepared you're going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say the backer analytics is great. Kickstarter's finally rolling out and integrating pixels and things like that has definitely really helped elevate and getting more transparency to the paid promotion side of things. And this one, we got one more question from the group there. And I want to start with, we'll get one sort of tip for the question from Crawford Wheeler II. Says, what are good ways to build an audience for someone just starting out? So like, what's one tip, like just one quick tip for someone never launched a Kickstarter project, starting from square one, and wasn't, born into celebrity. They're just starting out. What's one tip that you would give them to get this thing rolling? Maybe start with Christian.
Yeah, I will give up something in the market is called a magnet. It's a freebie, a good one, the best one you can, and try not to make it too big. You're not gonna give away a trade bag or something like that, but like a dash can, 6 pages, 10 pages, or 8 pages. I will go little by little, like introducing the characters, introducing the theme, introducing the scenes, the why, introducing yourself. Because that's very important. At the beginning, this is something that I read a lot of marketing books about this, is that people don't really buy the story or the characters, they buy the creator at the beginning. Is that their journey? So why they doing this? Who is this guy or who is this woman? Why they decide to write about this or to draw about this? Why it's important to them? How they learn to do it? Stuff like that. Answering those questions, and that's kind of like not very complicated or expensive to do. And from there, you start getting some traction. And then when you start with the groups and mailing lists and the actual spending money on marketing, you're gonna have to do if you want to be successful. I know some friends of mine who were so good that they didn't really need that, and God bless to them. But I don't recommend that, especially if you're starting out. And there's also a thing that a friend of mine told me some years ago, and it still rings to my head. Is like at the beginning, you don't really know how good or how bad you are. So you feedback is like essential. It's like air. So you really need to know who resonates with what you create, who is your ideal customer, where, as Sam was saying, where that they're located. Can you go to a convention? Can you knock on a store that's closed that can organize a signing? So you need to have a lot of prep. And what I would recommend is like a journal, like a blog, and use social media to explain that journey. So, hey, who are you, where you come from, why you do this, and what is the story about, who are the characters, and that builds. Yep. And
Absolutely.
with time, when you're ready to actually have a page or have a thing already done, say, oh, okay, yeah, I sign in. So that will be my advice.
Good tips there. Alan, you have any advice or just one little tip for someone just at the beginning of the journey?
Yeah, I'll co-sign a lot of what Christian said. When we did our first book, the Yours Truly, Johnny Dollar, the thing that sold it to people was the story, because on the surface, a book about a dude who stops ransomware attacks isn't necessarily good comic material. But when we can talk about how it comes from personal experience and why we're doing this and why this character and so on, that meant a lot. And as we got better at telling the story, we found that we had more backers. And as we moved through issue 1 through 4, that helped a lot. I'll also say networking, but don't just talk about yourself. Interact, build that as somebody who's helpful, because you're going through this process now. There are probably a lot of other people on social media sites or in the comics community that have the same questions that you. Answer those questions, help with your advice, etc. Because if you're seen as just out there just promoting yourself, you're not going to build that level of trust where people are going to want to back you, I think.
The old how to win friends and influence people advice of, to get people to be interested in you. Well, go take an interest in them first and build from there. Rob, one other tip you want to add to this mix for the
aside from listening to the ComixLaunch podcast, that's a big one.
That's a given.
Aside from that, I would definitely say make sure you have an email platform set up that you can push people towards to sign up for your email list, and then start going to social media, blast out your progress. Like right now, you may not have a full issue to give out or an ashcan, but you do have preliminary stuff like character designs. You can have sketches, line art, colors, and then move on to pages. You can be sharing out that stuff to get attention, to build up your socials, and put that link to that sign up page for your email lists. And people can be like, hey, I'm planning on, once this is done, I'm going to launch a campaign, and, get on the newsletter list, and we can give you some more back information for the people who like the process junkies out there. That's a great way to start building up when you don't have anything really to actually give or sell at that point.
Yeah. Anything to add, Sam?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say I agree with everything that's been said. I think this is really solid advice for first-time creators. The other thing that I would encourage people to do, which we touched on a little bit, is go to conventions and go to comic shops, ask for advice and feedback. If you're able to print ashcans, like Christian said, to give away to creators or people who have done this before, and either ask for a 30-minute sit down or an hour sit down to be like, hey, I have questions. The worst somebody can say is no, or I don't like your stuff. And that is also helpful feedback to get, but it never hurts to ask for help. What the end result of that, like the ideal end result, in my opinion, is you either find collaborators, people who can help you out, or when you do launch, you have people who are integrated into the system who will be able to vouch for you and give you a boost or a leg up, right? There's a 16-year history of Kickstarter. Comics is a well integrated part of that. If you're able to get eyes on your project from somebody who knows what they're doing and can say, hey, I really like this, go check that person out, that is going to be really helpful for you as well. Collaboration is a two-way street, right? You could help them with something down the line, they could help you with something down the line. It really just opens the door to more possibilities for you to be able to do more interesting stuff. Put yourself out there. It's super easy. I mean, my job is like this. I'm siloed even within Kickstarter, right? I'm a comics guy at a larger tech company. My world is comics, but I have to remind myself and creators that anything that I do ultimately affects the larger health of the site, right? But it is good for me to get out there, work with my team members, and similarly in comics, it's very easy for you to just make comics in your house and be like, this is awesome. Put yourself out there, test your mettle, test your expectations about your own work, and just get to know what's going on in the larger ecosystem. Comics is a large ecosystem. You have to participate in it to be a part of it. You can't make things in a vacuum.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, I think some creators feel like they have to be nonstop creation and they can only show up or start delivering when they've got something fully formed and ready to go for their audience. When in reality, I see a lot of creators that have a lot of success building an audience well in advance of their first thing ever launching because they're thinking about who it is that they want to serve, like who that audience is, and they're curating stuff for that audience. Like they're sharing the top movies that this audience should be paying attention. They're backing other projects on Kickstarter and being known as the person that knows the cool project that's live. And when you do that, and when you're good at curation, that actually will translate some goodwill towards your stuff when you launch as well. You know, if you're known as someone with good tastes and you launch your own book, yeah, people are going to give it a bigger look than if you already recommended 3 books that they loved. Yeah, that's going to bode well for you and your chances of launching. I wanted to give the creators that are here hanging out and appreciate anybody that spent the lunch break with us today, like Collector Detector here. I did want to give Alan, Christian, or Rob open the floor if there's anything that you wanted to ask Sam for a quick hit question or just a quick topic that you'd like a little bit of feedback on.
I think we were talking a little bit about Kickstarter building a community piece to the platform, but something that I would love within the platform would be a way similar to BackerKit launches single email platform where they can take all of the backers and email once rather than having to go to my updates and do every single past campaign to update to try and hit the people who may not have come back, or because that just ends up blowing up their mailboxes, and me personally, I've backed almost 1,000 campaigns. When somebody does that for every single campaign, it just goes right in the junk box. I'm not looking at it. And when I go to the platform and the messages, I wish there was a way to click all, mark as read, because when I have to go and do them all one at a time, drives me insane.
Good to know. Thank you.
You know what I'd love? I'd
Yeah,
love to be able
we have Santa, Kickstarter
Yeah.
Santa here with us.
Yeah,
Sam's
I've
going to
been a
make all
good-
our dreams come true.
I've been good this year's Kickstarter Santa. So here's what I'd like. I'd love to be able to badge people who have backed multiple of my campaigns, because we've had, we're now in our 10th campaign and we've had people who have backed the 9 previous campaigns. I'd love to be able to assign them badges, because I try and do things to give them a chance to feel special. And I love the secret rewards for that. I know in our last campaign we did that, and we had a bunch of our backers that really appreciated being able to use that, because we only made it available to people who had backed previous campaigns, but I had to reach out to them manually. So I'd love a way to badge them and give them extra special thanks for backing the campaign.
That's great. Thank you for the feedback.
As we are like in the Kickstarter Santa phase of the podcast, this is something we've been working on for years now, and we're very glad to say that we already achieved it. To have some part of the platform, because this is not something I affect only comics. It will be like a kind of group or like an incubator or something like that, to be able to encourage collaboration across countries, especially across continents, because this is something that's a major thing. It was mentioned here before, the thing of the raising costs. one of the most raising costs for anyone who is in comic is the whole shipping thing. It's insane nowadays. Insane. There are some shipping that costs more than the book itself, which is ridiculous. But it's like that. And on top of that, all the thing we have now with the political situation, the tariff and the taxes and et cetera, et cetera. So to have some kind of like a European division and like an Asian division and not just an America's division, because the comics are global. For example, the comic that we're going to launch this Friday, we have people from China, from Japan, from the US, from Europe, from here, from Ireland. So it's like everywhere. And that's what we like to have as a platform that we all know, that most of like people who have worked with it before, or is known, because it's not, Kickstarter doesn't need brand recognition. Everybody knows what it is in our sector. For example, I come from the theater and cinemas, a lot of things, they know the platform, so the branding is already done. But we have to have the tool, or I don't know exactly how to do it. I will say it will be something like a summit or something like that we can have creators from Europe, creators from the US, or from the US, Canada, Mexico, all America, and then creators from Asia, that we can like intensify the synergies, because I think that's how, I don't think it's not in the future. That's like the present. That's how it should be. Like you can have like a global, that's how all these big studios work, especially now with the technology. You can work remotely for a studio in Japan, in South Korea, or whatever. As long as you kind of like adequate your sleeping hours to the schedule, you're good. So that's the only tricky part. I would like to see something like that built in the platform somehow. That will be gangbusters for sure, for everyone, not only for comics, or for every kind of artistic endeavor, or even tech endeavor, or whatever that's created, that to have that way of like hub principle, or group principle, in order to connect people from all over the place. Now with the internet, it's pretty easy, quote unquote, and straightforward. It's just a matter of languages and stuff like that. But that's about it, because we normally publish in 4 languages, so we're kind of used to it, to do that. And so it will be, I would love to have that in the platform. That will be fantastic.
We've got the newsletter that we want to make sure that you get on, the comics specific newsletter for creators that Sam is releasing every week. Sam, anything else that you want to leave the folks with before you say goodbye?
Just to clarify, it's releasing every month, last Friday of every
Every
month.
month.
If anybody's going to be at Toronto Comics Arts Festival in a couple of weeks, and then I will be at San Diego Comic Con, would love to see people there if people want to get some FaceTime. But just generally, I am open. If people have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to email me. I will try to get back to you in a timely fashion, but I want to continue to have conversations with the community, feel like you have a point person that you can reach out to, and we can have conversations about either what the platform can do to help you, if you have any concerns with getting things approved or wanting to get things promoted. I just want you to know that I'm here for you, and I appreciate your time. I appreciate being part of these conversations, and I think it's really valuable for me to just be able to be more in the mix. So thank you, Tyler, for having me on, and thank you to Alan, Christian, and Rob for being part of the conversation.
Have a great rest of the day. I'm going to give these guys a chance to talk about their upcoming projects. Appreciate you, though. Again, Sam was nice enough to give out his Kickstarter email on this broadcast. So if you want to reach out to him about anything that he mentioned here, the email is right there, s.kusek@kickstarter.com. And so I appreciate Sam for sharing that with the group.